Thank you so much for clicking on my video. And if you're returning, welcome back to my channel. Today, we are continuing our recap of Diana, Her True Story in Her Own Words by Andrew Morton, but we are concluding the recap of the narration portion of the recordings and the transcripts. So these are the part of the book, the 25th anniversary edition, that included a narration of the actual recordings that Diana had with Andrew Morton, as well as the transcripts directly from her. So all of this was in her own words. After this, we will then begin recapping the actual book, but I'm going to do that in large chunks since we already are a few videos in. But today we conclude the narration portion of, or excuse me, the recap of the narration portion of the book. So let's get started. Once again, thank you so much for clicking on my video. If you have not already, feel free to go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on that notification bell. I want to say a big hello to all of the members, the subscribers, the viewers. I want to say a big hello to the friend circle and the Patreon members, and I'm going to curtsy to the royal court. Thank you so much for all that you do. So today, we are concluding our transcript recap. So this is the recap of her actual transcripts and the recordings that Andrew Morton took of her telling her own story in her own words. So we conclude that before we get into the actual novel. Now, again, since we've already been recapping this for some time, I'm going to probably split that into three parts instead of doing it chapter by chapter so that we're not doing this until the end of the year. But y'all, this might have been the worst time to recap this book right before the coronation, because I don't need more reasons to side-eye Charles and Camilla. But you know what? Everything happens for a reason. So let's get into it. We open up this portion of the book, this portion of the transcript portion of the book. We open this part up with Diana still talking about bulimia, but this time she's giving us way more depth. And I'm glad, because sometimes when people have illnesses or diseases, or especially when they're regarding mental or emotional health, we can gloss over them. And sometimes there can even be this habit of grouping them. So just being like, oh, I suffer from a mental illness and here are my symptoms. It's great when people have the time and they have the wherewithal to go in depth in the way that Diana did. So again, Diana suffered from bulimia. And so she talks about how that created issues for her in her life when she married Charles. And it's one of the reasons that the Queen Elizabeth, as well as the rest of the royal family, it's one of the things that they chalked up as an excuse for why the marriage was so tumultuous between Charles and Diana. One might ask, follow me here, as a logical person, as a logical thinking person, as a person who intends to look at all sides fairly and come to a reasonable conclusion. I said, look at all sides fairly. That doesn't mean that all sides are always fair. Hear me when I say that, because y'all be nitpicking. But I look at all sides of any conversation, and then I come to a reasonable conclusion after thinking critically on the topic. If you are sick and you're in a marriage, I know that it's hard on everyone, but it's not harder on the person who's actually experiencing it. Wouldn't that be an opportunity for the husband to really step up and nurture the bond between himself and his wife because he's helping her through a struggle? Oh, right. That only applies to men who actually want to be married to their wife. Okay, got it. My bad. But bulimia, if you did not know, it's an eating disorder in which a large quantity of food is consumed in a short period of time, often followed by feelings of guilt or shame. And there's often acts of purging that food from the body. This can also manifest in extreme exercise, and it's also associated with persistent and excessive concern with body weight. Now, we have talked about this at length of how often Charles consistently put down Diana's body. But she did continue suffering with bulimia even well after Harry was born. And one day she received a call from someone named Caroline Bartholomew. And this person offered her some advice on dealing with bulimia and depression. And while they were having this conversation, her friend Caroline says, if you don't talk to a doctor about this, I am going to out this issue that you're suffering to the public. And now listen, this was back in the 80s. I am not in this situation, so I'm going to try to handle this with care. Caroline Bartholomew is not a doctor. Okay, she's not a mental health professional or a therapist or a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist. In this situation, when I first heard that part of that part of the recording, I was not amused by it. Let me just let you hear it, and then I'll give you my thoughts afterward.
Even if I ate a lot of dinner, Charles would say, "Is that going to reappear later? What a waste."
So he's not helping, and that's its own issue, but he's intentionally adding to her stress, which is adding to the effects of the illness. But again, her friend Caroline Bartholomew interjected during a phone call, so let's hear what that was about.
"Have you told anyone?" I said. "No. You must tell a doctor." I said, "I can't." She said, "You must. I'll give you 1 hour to ring up your doctor, and if you don't, I'm going to tell the world." She was so angry with me.
Now, what I was going to say earlier is that Caroline Bartholomew is not a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist or working in the mental health field. And to me, this is the wrong approach. It's backing the person into a corner, making the person feel desperate. It's confrontational, it's judgmental, it's angry. I can also say that someone who is not informed, especially back in the 80s, about what to do to get a friend to seek help, would take this route because they feel like this is the route that will get them help. Now, a broken clock is right twice a day, y'all know. So it did work. It put the pressure on Diana to actually seek help because she was not given other options. And it did lead to her recovering. So although it worked, this wasn't the right route. I also can understand at the same time that while it wasn't the best route to go, it is the route that produced the desired outcome. And although it wasn't the right route, I can understand how Caroline felt and why she did this, because dealing with someone with a disease of this magnitude, especially from the outside in, when you can see how it's decimating their life and how it's affecting them physically, mentally, and based on their health, you might try to look for something urgent. You might feel that sense of urgency. And I can understand why this would have been an attractive route to getting your friend some help. Although it wasn't the right route, I do understand how she came to that conclusion because she was worried. She probably wasn't informed, especially back in the 80s. Bulimia was not a topic of discussion in the way that it is now. Even now, there is still some level of stigma and taboo around the conversation around mental health, but especially eating disorders. So I understand Caroline Bartholomew's choice to take this route. Although it's not a kind approach, the intent was kind, but you know my motto, impact versus intent. Intent does not negate impact, but I do think it should be considered. So my first inclination was like, what? But I do understand. Now, Diana did start to see a lot of progress, and that's how she finally sought help through therapy. And she went to Maurice Lipsage. And she said it was the first time she was ever able to be completely honest. He is the one who validated her feelings. And even when she went through conversations about how she felt about Charles, he validated her. Everyone else up until this point, aside from her sisters, Sarah and Jane, everyone else would either empathize with her and sympathize, but not take action. Maurice Lipsage actually said, he's wrong for this. The effects of your marriage are triggering your disease and the symptoms of your disease. And that's who made the connection, was her Dr. Maurice. He also validated her feelings, letting her know that the things that Charles is saying about you, the things that the royal family is saying about you aren't you. That's not who you are. That's what they think. What they think is none of your business. He told her that. You are allowed to be whoever you are without concern for how they feel about you. And that's when she started to separate how she felt about herself and build her self-confidence back up and find direction in her own life and started to essentially put up walls around herself when it comes to the royal family. And it reminded me a lot of Spare when Prince Harry talked about imagining himself when he gets, stress, and he imagines himself in the glass jar, and you only thing that can come in is what you allow in. Everything else is hitting the side of the glass. It can't touch you. And it's just interesting how they both had to learn that detachment skill around this very close to the same age in their 30s. Also, she realized through therapy that a lot of her anguish and distress regarding the royal family, she was internalizing through acting out the symptoms of bulimia, through the overeating and then the purging. She said she continued to go to therapy, and then she continued to learn affirmations from another therapist called Stephen Twigg. And that's how she started to build up like her own Tai Chi. She learned more about Tai Chi, but that's how she started to build up her own confidence. And she self-validated, and she put a lot of her worth in motherhood, her relationships with people, and the causes that she was championing. That's an amazing thing to me, that she was in the space that she was in and was able to pull herself out of it. But that's, again, therapy works, and it's not always going to be perfect. It's not always going to feel great. It's not always going to feel easy. It's going to feel like work, because it is, but the outcome is essential. So if you are even towing the line of seeing a therapist, I recommend you just go for 3 or 4 sessions. Just go for 3 or 4 sessions. And again, therapists are people. So even if the person you meet just doesn't do it for you, I have taken years to find the right therapist for me. But they're out there. It's just about matching. And there's so many different modalities, so many different types of therapy, so many types of therapists. Just keep in mind, your options are unlimited. It's like going to McDonald's and getting one French fry and being like, you know what, that does it. I don't like fast food. No, you go out there and see what you can get. So next, she talked a little bit about Fergie. Now, I have heard Fergie retell stories about Diana, but I had never heard Diana's perspective in this format. So in real time, because keep in mind, this is a narration of her actual tape recording. So this is all current to her in the space that she was in when she was talking about this. But before we go on about Fergie, I'm not really sure why people on Twitter follow me if they don't actually watch my YouTube, because anything I talk about on Twitter is often associated with my YouTube, as far as the royals. If I'm tweeting about something about the royals, it's because I have a video pertaining to that. And that's why I'm tweeting about it, in case people want to continue the conversation. So I had a live stream where I talked about Fergie conveniently always bringing up Harry and Meghan. Have I not talked about this for weeks? She's always bringing them up. And what she says, in my opinion, toes the line of propriety. First of all, they don't need to be your topic of discussion. I understand people will ask her about them because that's the nature. They're the current, that's going to get clicks. People love them. People love to hate them. They're a hot topic. They're current events. But as a family member, there is a way to segue out of that and bring it back to what your book is about, and bring it back to what you can actually speak on. Also, Prince Andrew is right there. So you should be talking about Andrew and the Yorks, not the Sussexes. So I have a whole live stream from last week where I talked about this. And then I have 2 more from the week before where we talked about this, how she's increasingly saying more things that are a little weird. She made the joke about hopefully knocking Harry off the top spot, his book off the top spot, which that was a joke, but it was like, girl, okay. And then she's consistently relating their experience to her own. I have a whole video of her saying this. This is not misconstrued. So as I'm going through some of the comments from that video, I'm tweeting some of my thoughts about Fergie just towing the line. She needs to leave it alone, let it go. She went too far, in my opinion, by starting this. People don't have room to judge them. That almost, I'm not going to go off track, but in my opinion, by saying people don't have room to judge them, that implies that there is something to judge. They haven't done anything wrong. So when she says those kinds of things, it toes the line because it validates both sides, and you cannot validate an untruth. And by people saying, whether you love them or hate them, or don't judge them, no one of us have room to judge, that implies that there's a reason to hate them or that there's some reason to judge them. And there isn't. And I would like it for once, which I said in that video, I would like for once for people to start simply saying, I agree with Harry and Meghan. They had to do what was right for them, and I stand behind them. I think that as a family, they will eventually all work it out, and they don't need any input from me, and you can move on. She doesn't do that. And so I'm tweeting my feelings on this because I just finished responding to a couple of comments. And all of a sudden, I just started getting berated and this barrage of you should know better than this. Her comments were taken out of context. What are you talking about? You don't even know what you're talking about. I expected more from you. And I keep getting this, and I'm like, what the hell are y'all talking about? How can her comments be taken out of context if I'm literally talking about the video of her saying the shit? So I'm so confused. Somebody CC'd me on a whole nother Twitter thread trying to put me in my place, and I'm so confused by this because I'm literally talking about a video that I made also with a clip of Fergie saying it. There's no way to misconstrue something she said on camera. So I'm so confused. Well, y'all, apparently Fergie had said something else and another publication had misconstrued her comments. I didn't know about this because I don't wake up in the morning and Google Fergie. I'm talking about my video with a clip of her saying the thing I'm discussing. You follow me? So I'm so confused when I start getting attacked by this other incident that I had no knowledge of. So I'm having to correct people. And I'm like, y'all do realize I have a YouTube? And I'm talking about a video that I made along with the clip of her saying it. So whatever was misconstrued ain't got nothing to do with me because I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this. But y'all, believe it or not, for 2 days now, I have been getting DMs. If you really expect to talk about this subject matter, you need to know what you're talking about. Ooh, if I tell you, the Lord is still working on me because a couple of y'all almost got your feelings hurt. Yeah, and I've had a few people apologize. Once I posted the video that I'm talking about, I'm like, y'all realize I have a live, I do a live stream where I have a clip of the comments that I'm talking about. I don't know what y'all are talking about. That ain't got nothing to do with me. But this is just a disclaimer. Know before you jump in somebody's comments or any other format, before you approach somebody with anything, know what you're talking about. Stop making assumptions. Instead of saying, Sharion, are you discussing this? And tagging me or asking before you jump down my throat, which you should know better than to do that to me. I am not a nice person when someone attacks me, and I don't intend to change that. Instead of doing that, why not ask? Because all of them made themselves look so stupid. And I'm sitting here like, first of all, you putting on a cape behind Fergie. Good luck, child. You are not here for a reason with me. You don't need to be here. You need to go on somewhere else. And I'm not trying to be mean, but I have thousands of people constantly doing that all the time. And I'm not always going to be nice. As a matter of fact, I'm making a point to not be nice. So that's my first and last warning on that. Before you think you finna talk crazy to me, first of all, there's no reason to talk crazy to me, period. If I say something wrong, there's a way to tell me that this thing is wrong or needs to be corrected or something like that. You don't talk to me crazy because I don't talk to anyone else like that. And so if you want respect, you got to give it, because if you give me disrespect, baby, I will take us to hell. I am not a nice person. Even in the live stream the other week, I said something, I pronounced a flower name wrong or something, I can't remember. And somebody was like, did I just hear you say XYZ? I ignored them. But see, talking to people like that, if you go, let me just say this, before you type it, ask yourself what the tone sounds like for someone who doesn't know you or your intent. And make your comment very clear what the tone is supposed to be. Okay, so let's get back on track talking about Fergie, since y'all want to jump down my throat around Fergie Ferg. So anyway, now when it comes to Fergie, Diana said people felt like Fergie was a breath of fresh air. But the downside to that was that they used her fun-loving attitude as an insult towards Diana. So let's hear more about.
I met Fergie when Charles was getting near me, and she kept rearing her head for some reason, and she seemed to know all about the royal setup. I wasn't quite sure how to take it. Suddenly everybody said, "Oh, isn't she marvellous? A breath of fresh air. Thank God she's more fun than Diana."
So Diana, of all people, is actually feeling feelings of jealousy towards Fergie, to the point where she is actually trying to be way more cavalier, to have more fun. She's trying to dress a little different. At one point, she wore leather pants to a concert, and she was hoping that that would help her to be more hip and seem more fun. But she said it did backfire. And as her astrologer told her earlier that year, everything you do this summer, you will have to pay for. But it wasn't just Diana who was jealous of Fergie. She also said that Fergie was jealous of her.
I got terribly jealous of Fergie, and she got terribly jealous of me. She kept saying to me, "You mustn't worry, Dutch. Everything's going to be fine.
So it's very clear that they did find a really great friendship. And she said very nice things about Fergie. She really admired Fergie's way of just not being daunted by her experience in the White House or in the royal family. And so it's great to see that they were able to push past their feelings of jealousy. And honestly, jealousy is a very natural emotion. It's actually not a negative feeling at all. It's actually something great to channel you. And sometimes what we think is jealousy is actually just our own need to progress in a certain area. And when we admire that trait in another person and we know that that's an area where we may be slightly inadequate, we should channel that into being more productive versus being competitive or self-loathing or even projecting that outward. So Diana also takes us into more conversation regarding what the tabloids were essentially doing to her at that time. Now, it goes beyond just scrutinizing her clothes, following her around, not giving her a moment peace. It goes beyond that. She also shares 2 instances where she was accused of having affairs with 2 of Charles's friends.
Fergie was asked by Charles to find 2 single men for our ski holiday in Closters.
So this is where Diana meets Philip Dunn and David Waterhouse. Now, they have both been rumored to be affairs of hers, but that's because of the tabloids. That's what she says in the book. So Diana was accused of having an affair with each of them, and this is why. So after that ski trip, this is before the ski trip where Major Hugh Lindsay passed away. This is before that, about a year earlier. They went on a different ski trip, and David Waterhouse, Philip Dunn, Fergie, Charles, a couple of people went on this ski trip. Afterwards, Diana had really struck up a good friendship with each of them, but she was really closer with David Waterhouse. He made her laugh. They had a really good time together, but they were just friends. Now, after this ski trip as a group, Diana joined 15 other people at Philip Dunn's family estate. Now, keep in mind, this is the norm. This is how this group hangs out. That might sound odd to you and I, to go in a big old group to a family home of someone that we just met. That is how people in these royal circles and these aristocratic circles work. So this is not out of the norm. Mind you, Diana is one of 15 or so people. So there are a lot of people at this party or at this overnight stay. Well, the tabloids found out about Diana being there. And since it was Philip Dunn's family home and he was a pretty handsome guy, they paired the 2 of them and ran stories that Diana and Philip were having an affair. How messed up is that? Then later, Diana continued to nurture this friendship with herself and not only Philip Dunn, but also David Waterhouse. They were friends of Charles and Diana. And so she would hang out with David Waterhouse all the time. They struck up a really good friendship. So one time they went to a David Bowie concert together. They happened to get photographed just hanging out as friends with other people there. And the tabloids ran with yet another rumor of another affair about Diana. So now there's this narrative kind of being out there. They've already been calling the woman crazy. They've already been calling her not fit for the job and all these kinds of things. They've been following her around, stressing her out, and then lamenting her for her stress. Now they're calling her an adulteress. Absolutely out of line. I understand why she loathed the tabloids and the British media. I just can't even imagine. So she said she calls David to apologize for all the scrutiny that he's receiving, and listen to what she has to say.
One ran on every front page on Monday morning. I was in tears. I was hysterical. I was horrified, mortified, cross with myself. I rang David up in the household cavalry to apologize, and I got such a strange reply back. "Oh, it's fine. It's all right. I can cope with it." And I thought, wait a minute. He's enjoying this. I was so naive.
I feel like this is just another example of how Diana really did struggle to find a solid circle of friends in royal life. She always ended up realizing that people were kind of out for the take. Now, there were people who were really good to her, but this is an instance where when it's bad, it's terrible. And just not even having that discernment, especially since she was very young. I want to keep in mind that Yes, Diana was in her late 30s when she passed away. But at the time this book was written, Diana was just 30 years old. And she's talking about things that happened to her years prior. So she is in her early 20s during most of the things that she's recounting for us. This is not a time where most people make solid choices, especially in their friendships and relationships. You are still building up your spirit of discernment, your ability. That is a skill. And so she did let a few people get really close to her who just essentially did not deserve to be there. And even though she had a really good time with David Waterhouse, he just seemed to kind of be out for attention. That's the way this portion of the tapes sounds. But as we get into the book, I'll be able to clarify a lot more. So Diana also talks to us about that very awful and deadly avalanche that they experienced when they were in Kloster, Switzerland in 1988. Now, this is another ski trip 1 year after the one that she just talked about. And on this ski trip, it was Princess Diana, Sarah Ferguson, Prince Charles, and Major Hugh Lindsay. He did not bring his wife because his wife was 6 months pregnant at the time, so she stayed back because it was a ski trip. Diana happened to be sick with the flu, and although Fergie decided to join Charles, Major Hugh, and Major Hugh on the skiing portion, she fell upside down in a ditch. And it really shook her up really badly. And she was pregnant. She was 4 months pregnant at the time. So she decided to stop skiing and she came back to the cabin with Diana and they just hung out and spent a lot of time. Well, all of a sudden they hear a bunch of helicopters and that's when they realize like, oh my God, there had to have been an accident. They find out it was Major Hugh Lindsay who passed away. And it's really sad, but before we get into what happened to him and the fallout from that, let's hear her talk about Major Hugh Lindsay as a person.
Fergie and I were closer to Hugh than Charles ever was. Hugh just felt sorry for Charles. He was very good with all the members of my husband's family. He was always a star trooper.
So he sounded like a really nice person. He's someone that Diana spoke very highly of in this book. And if you've read the book, then you know she dedicated a lot of time to giving us a full picture of who he was as a person. And he was someone that she definitely cared for, him and his wife, Sarah, as well. Well, he did pass away. And so Diana and Fergie decided to pack his suitcase to ensure it got back to his wife, Sarah, along with his watch. And then she also gave the passport to the police. So she just took charge. The way she describes Charles, however, once he finally got back to the cabin, is quite appalling. I would say very selfish. She felt it was Charles's sense of danger that actually put Major Hugh Lindsay in harm's way in the first place. She even said that Charles couldn't understand why Sarah, Major Hugh Lindsay's widow, was angry. Charles even had to be told not to go skiing the next day. And it's interesting because once this was announced and once this was in the news, Charles over Sarah, Major Lindsay's wife or widow, Charles got more sympathy for losing a friend. And he had to be told not to go skiing the next day. He received all this pity. And the saddest part is that Sarah Lindsay was 6 months pregnant and they had only been married 8 months. So she suffered an extremely devastating loss. But let's hear what Diana had to say about it.
To this day, I think it was the two men, my husband and Charlie's, sense of danger that took someone's life. And when the press said my husband suffered, okay, he suffered, but nothing like Sarah suffered. When I went to talk to my husband about Sarah Lindsay and how she felt about Hugh being taken, he always said to me, I don't understand why she's angry. We owe it to Sarah to take the body home, and we're not going skiing tomorrow. We must take Hugh back. Anyway, there were tremendous arguments about that. So eventually, we had to use the words selfish and Sarah a widow, and it worked.
So the fact that they had to break down why it was important to return Major Hugh Lindsay's body back to his wife over going skiing again the next day is absolutely insane to me. Like, Charles really does struggle with connecting with humans, like on a human level. I have a hard time believing that anyone is that self-absorbed or that callous. But here we are. Like, again, I'm reading this and listening to this after having read Spare, after having the last few years of observation at my disposal. And to know that he's always been this way is insane. But I can't imagine hearing this in the time that this book was published, that this is your future king. And you had no other semblance that this was the case. Like, that had to be jarring. If you were alive at that time and reading the tabloids, or part of that, if you remember that time in history, please let me know what that must have been like hearing that. I'm really interested in what that was like in real time. So they get Major Hugh Lindsay's body back. Charles gets all the pity, and Diana does all the work to make sure that they handle it appropriately and with great consideration to Sarah Lindsay, Major Hugh Lindsay's wife. So next, I wanted to talk about Diana's comments regarding Charles and the way their relationship continued to evolve after Harry is born. So Charles goes back to Camilla after Harry is born. Diana describes Charles at this time as being extremely dismissive, callous. He makes very rude and crude comments about her bulimia in public. He's very nasty to her. He's consistently talking about her weight. Now, all of this is alleged, but I'm just discussing what was said in the book. She said she described in great detail how awful it was to realize that Charles had gone back to Camilla. And I can't imagine what that must have felt like with two young children as well. Charles even ridiculed her for not being enough like Fergie. He said that she should be more jolly. In addition to that, one time he went to Camilla's sister's 40th birthday party, fully expecting Diana not to go. And when she decided to be more assertive through therapy, she decided to take more control in her life. And you see this resulting in her asserting her will in a lot of other ways and holding her tongue when she's considering things for thought. And she takes us into great detail in this portion of the book of her experience with this, which is great. That is a moment of evolution for every young woman as well. So it's amazing to hear her get more assertive, to be more focused, and to really come into her own in real time, essentially, as she's talking herself through it in the book. But she decides at this 40th birthday party, oh, my husband's going to the side host sister's birthday party. I might as well join him. Now, this has to be one of the funniest stories I have ever heard from a royal. Has to be, hands down, because I'm actually listening to this clapping. I had to rewind this because Mama had had enough. So, Charles finds out Diana wants to go to the party. He negs her the whole time. You shouldn't go, don't go. Or she says he needles her. He follows her around. You shouldn't go. You're not going to want to go. You're not going to have fun. You're going to have to keep up small talk. You know how you don't like that. Blah, 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 blah. These people you're not going to have fun with. They're much older than you. He is trying like hell to keep his wife from going to the side host sister's party. And she's like, yeah, that's cute. Anyway, open this door so I can walk on through it. Like, she's not playing games. This is a queen, okay? So she goes to the dinner party and she makes it a point to make her best effort. She is charming. She's keeping up conversation. She's not withdrawn or introverted. She is the life of the party, essentially, having a blast. She even makes it a point to not kiss Camilla on the cheek, which is kind of an informal greeting that you give to people who are acquainted with the royal family. They don't necessarily have to shake hands. Oh, Diana said, oh, hell no, bitch. We shaking hands. So she shakes her hand firmly. Oh, okay. Okay, talk about subtle shade. So, and I hope she dug her nails in her hand, that little wretched hand. Anyway, after dinner, they're having their little cocktail hour or whatever, and they're communing. And she realizes after about an hour and a half of work in the room, as she does, the blonde bombshell realizes that there is nowhere, that Charles and Camilla are nowhere to be seen. So she starts to make her way downstairs where there's a more intimate party going on, and everyone tries to get her to stop. Everyone's like, no, Diana, you don't need to go down there. Diana, you don't need that. It's fine. And she's like, excuse-moi, I am going to see my husband. And if you didn't know, I'm the future queen. So why don't you calm down? No, she didn't say all that. But she did say, I'm actually going to find my husband. We've had more than enough time to commune separately. I'm going to go find my man. So she goes downstairs and she finds a quaint little threesome of Camilla, Charles, and some other random guy sitting down talking. Diana goes over and has a seat and joins the conversation. So now everybody awkward because the real queen is in the room. And so she sits down, and then the men are like, well, why don't we all just go back upstairs? Let's break up the little fun fest. And Diana says, okay, that's cute. Camilla, stay behind. I need to talk to you. Let's let Diana tell the rest of the story.
Camilla, I'd love to have a word with you if it's possible. And she looked really uncomfortable and put her head down. And I said to the men, okay, boys, I'm just going to have a quick word with Camilla. And I'll be up in a minute. And they shot upstairs. Camilla, I would just like you to know that I know exactly what is going on. She said, I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, I know what's going on between you and Charles, and I just want you to know that. She said to me, you've got everything you ever wanted. You've got all the men in the world falling in love with you, and you've got 2 beautiful children. What more could you want? I didn't believe her, so I said, I want my husband.
I am so glad that Diana had this moment because it's a moment that a lot of people do not get. People expect wives or women who are being cheated on or women who are victims of infidelity to just sit there quiet and not say anything and to just let him cheat in peace, etc., etc. There's all these different comments regarding how a woman should react when she's been cheated on. But here's the thing. The onus isn't on the person who's been wronged. The onus is on the perpetrators. And very rarely do the victims of infidelity get to confront the perpetrators in this way. And I know that the common saying is you don't deal with the woman, you deal with the man. But let me tell you how I'm set up. You deal with everybody who did you wrong. You deal with the perpetrator who you're married to. You deal with the heifer who knew y'all was married and still did what she did because she was a participant willingly in your betrayal. And you deal with the enablers. How you deal with them, I can't tell you. But what I will say is you have a right to deal with them. Now, don't break any laws. But what Diana did, very nice, nasty approach, and then hit her with that direct, I know what you're doing, ho. She hit her with that. I can get behind that. You know what? In a nice and subtle and a royal way, she described Camilla, that low-down dirty monkey with a wig on.
That's a dirty, low-down monkey with a wig on.
She described her in the same way that Evelyn Braxton described Michael. Do y'all remember that scene from Braxton Family Values?
You know that you lay it low and spread it wide. You don't care who it is. What? Now, figure that out. I had enough of his lying, his cheating, and his crap. And you know what? I better get out of here because if I don't, it will be 2 sad days. The day they bury him and my trial.
That is so fitting. But here's the thing. If that wasn't bad enough, the fact that she had the nerve to say, you have everything, you have all the men in the world wanting to be with you, what more do you want? How do you say that to the man's wife? Camilla has no shame at all. And now she's calling herself Queen Camilla. Anyway, here's the thing. This is going to be the queen in 1 month. She's already queen, but she's going to be crowned in 1 month. Good luck, y'all. Anyway. And Charles is just as bad. But here's the thing. The next night, first of all, that night when they got in the car to go home, Charles, as Diana described it, was all over her, putting her down, yelling at her, very upset. The next morning, he tried to give her the cold shoulder. And basically, he asked her, what did you say to Camilla? Like, he confronted his wife about being disrespectful to his whore. And he just as big a hoe, if he's a bigger hoe than Camilla, because he's the one with all the responsibility in this situation. It's just disgusting. But Diana said, all I told her was that I loved you. And he was like, I doubt it. Like, he really pressed on Diana about what she said to his mistress. See, This is why I feel like he took advantage of a very young person. He took advantage of his stature, his connections, his prominence. He really took advantage of her by being the person in the relationship who held all the power in that dynamic. And so he used that against her. She was in some way apologetic when she was speaking to Charles. She even said she was deathly afraid of Camilla. And honestly, if I saw those weed whacker teeth coming at me, I too would probably be very nervous. So I really do commend Diana on standing up, not only for herself, but for her marriage. I just wish she had a partner who was willing to do the same. I just wish she did. Now, as we get through this book, I am looking forward to hearing more details about this. But again, this is just our recap of the transcripts, which are only available on the 25th anniversary edition. So Diana decided after this point in the book, in the recordings, she decided to focus more on what her purpose in life was. And we're going to start with her comments on motherhood. So Diana spoke openly about motherhood. She talked about loving motherhood. She said she felt like it was a calling more than anything else. She felt like she was meant to be a mother. It was everything she ever dreamed. She loved motherhood more than anything else. And she said she thrives on the affection for and from her boys. She also said both of her sons were destined because every other couple at that time had had a boy and a girl, and she and Charles had two boys. And he greatly expected a girl, but they had two boys, and she felt like it was destined. She also spoke very openly about teaching William that being treated differently wasn't something to lean into. And he even got to the point where he was embarrassed by it when he was treated differently because he was the heir. And I also love this part in the book where she acknowledges that Harry was born to be the backup. But she said, and that is in the best way possible because he has his own destiny to create. And she made sure that he knew it. Which, fast forward to Spare, he is very well aware. And he also comments on her intention for him was to build his own life and follow his own destiny, which I thought was a very beautiful thing. It's interesting listening to this and reading this after having read Spare. I still continue to find the connections there. Another part of her revelations was saying, how important helping out in the AIDS crisis was for Diana. Now, keep in mind, this is in the 80s. This is at the height of the AIDS crisis. Diana was the first royal person or person of notoriety in general to be photographed touching an AIDS patient. And she carried that through. She also spoke openly about this visit in 1991 to the Casey House AIDS Hospice with Mrs. Bush. And so they went and spoke with patients at the AIDS hospice. And then they also spoke with the staff. They got in-depth knowledge of what the experience was like for the patient, but also for the people in their lives, their significant others, their family, the people who would be there after they're gone and who were helping the patient through it. They were also photographed shaking hands at this location, as well as hugging someone in a hospital bed. Diana sat down and talked to that person's partner about what was to come. And she said if she had her choice, that would be her job full time, traveling hospices and nursing homes and speaking to people in that time of their life. This is the second time she makes note of that as well. Another very interesting thing Diana said in this portion of the book was that she always knew she would never be queen.
From day one, I always knew I would never be the next queen. No one said that to me. I just knew it.
But even here, she said an astrologist, Penny Thornton, also echoed this in saying that at some point she saw in Diana's future that she would be making her way out of the royal family. Now, keep in mind, this was before Diana and Charles had divorced, and this is obviously when Diana was alive and well. So she had no idea what was to come. But she also talked about, spoke openly about spirituality and her connection and her understanding of Tai Chi and her connection spiritually to the world around her. Again, she did say that she spoke with her late grandmother, her uncle, and her former protection officer via a clairvoyant. She even said that at times she felt like she was psychic or just tapped into the universe around her. She even predicted the timing and manner of death of Charles's horse. And at the time that she made this prediction, the horse appeared perfectly healthy and there was no inclination that it was sick or unwell. I found that to be interesting because in Harry's book, he did speak with a medium who conveyed a few messages for Diana, from Diana. Remember the broken ornament, the broken Queen Elizabeth ornament, which is kind of hilarious. And so it's interesting because I feel like that is another form of validation for that story, which I believed it, because why the hell would he have to lie? But I just found it to be interesting because if she were to connect in any way, a psychic medium would definitely be that way, considering she also used psychic mediums to connect with family members who had passed on. So I thought that was such an interesting part of the book. Another part that was also interesting in her revelations was how deeply she felt for the people around her and connecting with the people around her. She talked about wanting to always make sure that when she spoke with the public, that they felt and understood that she's just human, and that they understood that they, were relevant and important, and they were on her level and she was on their level, because sometimes with a royal title, people can perceive you as higher up than them. And she always wanted people to connect. So she would watch popular TV shows at the time to ensure she always had something to talk about with people. So she binged everything that came on like prime time to make sure that she always had a way to chat with people. She said talking about entertainment was the way that everyone felt like they were informed. And she said that the airs would fall and the tension would drop and people would just talk to her like a human. She even said that it was her desire to have garden parties for all handicapped people in the UK. However, she said Buckingham Palace grounds won't allow too many people in wheelchairs to be in their gardens because of the grass. So I thought that was a really interesting part. Their grass is more important than their citizens, but okay. She said she felt positive about the future at that time, but overall, she said the only thing she could say for certain was that she would continue to commit her life to helping people. Another little note that she left us with was that she felt like Charles wouldn't make a great king, and that it was in his interest to just run off with Camilla, and it would be in his best interest to allow William to ascend to the throne when it was time. Now, when I was listening to that, I said, because later on she says the same thing. But let's hear her say that here.
If I was able to write my own script, I'd say that I would hope that my husband would go away with his lady and sort that out, and leave me and the children to carry the Wales name through to the time William ascends the throne. And I'd be behind them all the way, and I can do this job so much better on my own. I don't feel trapped.
I feel like that's saying a mouthful. I feel like she definitely predicted the future, except what she didn't bank on was that they would completely roll back all of these rules for the modern family and allow Charles to marry his mistress and his mistress to take over. And this is really King Camilla's coronation. As we talked about on Wednesday, this is obviously King Camilla's coronation. This is actually pretty sad to see, because when you look back and see how much promise and how many opportunities the royal family had to not only modernize, but to continue to elevate their status in many ways and their global impact, they always opted not to. Every single time. We did watch history try to repeat itself, but good thing that Harry got to be the husband to Meghan that unfortunately Diana did not get to have. But I'm sure she is very pleased that her son turned into everything that she would have wanted him to be. So that's all I've got for this recap. In 2 weeks, when we resume this recap, next week we'll be doing Floodlight on Friday. So the following week we'll resume, and we will start with part 1 of the actual book. So this is just recaps of the transcripts and the recordings that she left from her own interviews. So next we'll be starting with part 1. It's going to be a 3-part breakdown of the actual book itself. And then we have an amazing follow-up after it. I have so much coming down the pipeline that I'm excited, but it's hard to keep secrets. But I am interested in what you have to say. This was a lot this time around. I feel like this was the most meat and potatoes we've gotten thus far. So tell me what your thoughts are. I think the story that shocked me the most was the passing of Major Hugh Lindsay and Charles's reaction to it. He had to be told not to go skiing. Like, that is just not a leader. He actually got mad at Diana for confronting his mistress. He actually was cavorting with his mistress at the same party that his wife would. Like, it's just so much. I feel like this portion reminded me greatly why Charles should never be king, but here we are. So please leave your comments down in the live chat or in the comment section below. I am very interested in hearing what you have to say. And members, I have something very special coming up for you. On Coronation Day, keep a lookout. You might have something new that drops. I can't say what it is, but I hope you enjoy it and you light up the live chat with it. So that's all I've got for you today. If you have not already, please don't forget to go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on that notification bell. If you're interested in becoming a member, hit that join button or use the link in the description box below to join us over on Patreon. Upcoming at the end of this month of April, we will be doing a members only panel. So if you are a member and you are interested in being part of the panel, email me at hellosharion@gmail.com. That's hellosharion@gmail.com. The email is in the description box below. And just send me an email and let me know that you want to be part of the panel, and I will send you an invitation. It will be via Zoom. And if you have a topic you want to make sure we discuss, put that in the email as well. Before we get out of here, I just wanted to say it is so great to be revisiting Diana's story, especially this version because it's in her own words. And I thought this clip was very sweet, and it just reminded us what a sweet and gentle soul she truly was. So I'm going to let Diana take us out, and I will see you guys on Monday.
I don't like the glamorous occasions anymore. I feel uncomfortable with them. I would much rather be doing something with sick people. I'm more comfortable there.
Oh.